All right, 1 Samuel chapter 19. And this is not a real long chapter, but we'll get through it. By the way, don't forget Sunday evening.
Movie night.
Movie night. No regular service. Bring snacks. The movie is about an hour and a half. So probably if you want to have some time just to goof off and eat snacks, be here about 4. We'll start the movie at 5. Be done about 6:30ish. Sunday after that, first Sunday of September, Lord's Supper. And this Friday, we have lunch at the Casino, something like that. The Mexican restaurant in Trenton at 11. All right. 1 Samuel chapter 19. Now at this point, after Saul has gotten David married off to his younger daughter, and then realizes that that might not work out quite as well as he thought, because apparently his younger daughter did actually like David, and she wasn't going to rat him out or do anything to him. So Saul, up until this point, has just been underhanded and sneaky about how he has wanted David to meet his demise. But beginning in chapter 19,
the glove come off.
Yeah, pretty much. Saul gets pretty pointed about it. It says, "Now Saul told Jonathan his son and all his servants to put David to death. But Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David." Obviously, at this particular point, either Saul is blind or Saul just doesn't get it that apparently Jonathan and David were pretty good friends by this point. And for him to order his son to kill David, Saul, like I said, Saul's just losing his gourd at this point.
Well, he's got the curse on his mind.
But it didn't work out the way he thought. So verse 2 says, "So Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father, is seeking to put you to death. Now therefore, please be on guard in the morning, and stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. If I find out anything, then I shall tell you." Well, why would they be out in the field? Why do you think he told David to hide in the field near where they would be?
So David could hear.
Well, either David could overhear it, or once Jonathan really got the lowdown on what's going on, since Jonathan probably knew where David would be, Jonathan could look over his shoulder and get out of here. Run. Plus, if he's out in the open, he can make a clean break for it. If David is anywhere in town, in his home, in the palace, it's easy to catch somebody or get somebody cornered if you're inside. But if you're outside, usually you can, especially since they didn't have modern weapons, if he can get at least far enough away that he's beyond the, shooting distance of an arrow, he can make a clean break. All right, verse 4 said, "Then Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, Do not let the king sin against his servant David, since he has not sinned against you, and since his deeds have been very, very beneficial to you. For he took his life in his hand and struck the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by putting David to death without a cause?" What's he doing here? I mean, clearly he's defending David, but why is he describing it this way? Why this particular issue?
Well, it's a benefit to Saul.
Well, not only that, but I think he's kind of he's putting Saul to shame here. He said David took his life in his hands to defend Israel, and although he didn't say it, the implication here is the rest of you, including you, Dad, King,
took all the credit.
yeah, you were hiding and waiting on somebody else to step up and do your work for you.
Yeah.
He didn't say this, but you know that's what's probably implied here. He said, David did you a big service by stepping up to the plate and doing what you should have done. All right, verse 6, it says, and Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul vowed, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. You'll notice in this that Saul agrees, not to call for David's execution. But in none of this, and you track this as we go on, the number of times Saul tries to call for David's execution. At what point does Saul ever actually give a legitimate reason for wanting David killed? He never does. It's all completely irrational. The only reason Saul has is he don't like him. He never does give a reason. He doesn't say, oh, well, by the way, David did this and David deserves to die. Or, here's my reasons. He never gives a reason. But here he agrees, okay, we won't put him to death, but we all know that was pretty short-lived. Verse 7 says, then Jonathan called David. Jonathan told him all these words, and Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as formerly. All right, well, what's that implying?
He went back to serving.
Yeah, brought him back into the palace throne room so he could go back to playing his harp for Saul. Which is interesting because at this point, what was David's official position in the army?
He's the commander of 1,000.
Mm-hmm. So he's gone from being a commander of 1,000 to now Saul's got him back in the palace playing his harp. Which on the one hand, that may have been to David's benefit in that David's now back in the throne room. But you also have to wonder, did Saul invite David back into the throne room to get him back in an enclosed quarters where Saul was so Saul could have at him again? Yeah, and in fact, before this chapter's over, that's exactly what he does. Verse 8 says, when there was war again. Now, between verses 7 and verse 8, we have no idea how long this was. That's the one thing Samuel never really gives us any idea. He didn't say, well, 10 months later or 2 months later. We don't have a clue. I mean, it could have been a year or two for all we know. When there was war again, David went out and fought with the Philistines and defeated them with great slaughter, so that they fled before him. So once again, David has assumed his role as a commander and routs the Philistines. So the other side of this is that even though Saul wants to get rid of David, David has proven himself as a military commander, and as such, who else is going to be on David's side?
Jonathan.
Well, not just Jonathan.
All the troops, for sure.
All the troops that David is commanding have now seen what he's capable of doing. And let me tell you, short of God's personal intervention, you don't go out and win battles by yourself. That's a team effort. So clearly, David has got the support of all of these troops that are following him in battle. And there's one thing that kind of stress will do when you're in this kind of dangerous environment. You develop a camaraderie that you know, as anybody who's ever been in combat will tell you, you're not fighting for, you know, flag and king and country and all that. When the, you know, when the bullets, or in this case, arrows start flying, you're there protecting the buddies that's standing next to you. And you develop a pretty close friendship with the people that are around you. So if they have already been in combat, now they're fighting a war again, I guarantee you David has got the full support and protection of at least 1,000 Israelite soldiers that are following him in battle. If Saul's going to kill him, it ain't going to happen on the battlefield. Verse 9, we kind of switch gears a little bit. It says, now there was an evil spirit from the Lord on Saul, as he was sitting in the house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing the harp with his hand. So we fought a war in one verse, gone back to the palace. Now here's the interesting thing about this particular scene. They sent the Philistines packing again. The battle or war or whatever, you know, that's over with. They're back in the palace. Why is Saul in his throne room and still has a spear in his hand? Only two possibilities. He is either that paranoid, as you just mentioned, he's losing it upstairs, or he went in there from the beginning with the intention of chucking that spear at David. I mean, let's face it. If you're the king and you're in the palace throne room, you're probably in the most well-protected, safest place in the entire kingdom. And Saul is sitting there with a spear in his hand. While David's probably on the other side of the room. Of course, we don't have any idea how big this throne room was, but he's in there playing the harp. In verse 10, he tries it again. And Saul tried to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he slipped away out of Saul's presence so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. Now, what's different about this from the first time Saul tried it?
Didn't he try it twice the first time?
Yeah, the first time Saul chucked the spear at him twice. He threw it at David. David ducked the spear, but didn't run. Saul goes and gets his spear out of the wall and throws it at him again. This time, David's got enough sense to realize if he stays, Saul's going to try it again. So Saul chucks the spear out of him. He ducks it. It hits the wall. And this time, David figures, I'm out of here. So he leaves, and you see at this point, he has said he escaped that night. Well, the implication is he didn't hang around in the palace. I think at this point, David has finally seen their handwriting on the wall and realizes no matter what, Saul's going to try to kill him. So David leaves completely. Verse 11 says, then Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him in order to put him to death in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be put to death. Well, obviously word has gotten to her that dear old daddy is going to have guards outside waiting on you to come out in the morning. And so you're going to have to sneak off sometime during the night and leave town completely. Now, this tells you that at this particular point, Saul's daughter, while she probably is, as we will see here in a minute, spiritually is not quite there, she does at this point, apparently, she loves her husband. And she does what she can to protect him. So verse 12 says, so Michal let David down through a window, and he went out and fled and escaped. By the way, where have we seen that scene before?
Rahab.
Yep. Rahab and the wall of Jericho. Yeah. All right, and Michal, now verse 13 tells us what we need to know about her spiritual condition. And Michal took the household idol and laid it on the bed and put a quilt of goat's hair at its head and covered it with clothes. Now, these household idols, we already know pretty much how big they were, don't we? Who else do we know that swiped the household idols?
Rachel.
Yeah, and they were small enough she was able to sneak them out in the horse's set, or the camel in this case, the camel's saddlebag. These little household idols are probably about that big. Now, what else we know about this is if David had known that his wife had a household idol in the house, do you think he would have allowed that?
Nope.
She probably had it hidden from him. Probably had it stashed in her personal goods. So I'm guessing at this point, but I really seriously doubt that David would have allowed that in the house had he known it was there. But she sneaks him out through the window, pulls out this idol. They probably were about that big around, and just puts it, at the head of the bed, throws some goat hair or something around it, and throws enough of a quilt over it to make it look like there's somebody there. Probably some pillows and stuff. You get the idea. Makes it look like there's somebody laying in the bed, because she knows Daddy's guards are still outside. Now, how is it that you could sneak somebody down through a window in a house? Keep in mind, their houses, only the richest of the rich had glass in their windows. Glass was not a routine item like we have in homes today.
Did they even have glass back then?
Oh yeah, they had the technology to make glass, but only the riches of the rich usually could afford such. Most homes did not have glass in their windows, and even in a lot of the castles, didn't have glass. They were open to the wind. But yes, there were glass as an invention was available. They knew that you could melt sand and form glass. But here's the issue. If Daddy's soldiers are outside waiting, how was she able to sneak him out the window and him get away in the middle of the night without being seen by the guards?
It was very, very dark.
Thank you. Keep in mind, I know you were joking, but you were right on target. Keep in mind, they didn't have street lights.
Sure.
When the sun went down back in that day and age, it got dark.
It was likely a new moon.
And possibly a new moon, possibly cloudy. I wouldn't have any doubt that God probably might not have orchestrated a cloudy night to protect it, but bottom line was, when the sun went down in that day and age, that's why, robbers would wait by the roadside and could jump on somebody in the middle of the night, because you could stand right by the roadside and not be seen. So she sneaks him out through the window. He takes off, and she fixes up his bed like he's still in it. In verse 14, when Saul sent messengers to take David, Saul obviously at this point is determined he's going to drag David into the palace and execute him, up to and including sending his guards to go get him. Now, these would have been palace guards. They would not have been among the soldiers that actually served David in the army. When Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, "He is sick." Then Saul sent messengers to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me on his bed, that I may put him to death." So, obviously, she doesn't let him in the house. Or if at anything, they might have been at the door, and she points to the back bedroom where, she's probably got his, the idol covered up in the pillows, and said, "You can see through the door. He's in bed sick. Now get out of here." Now, why wouldn't they have just pushed right on past her and said, we're taking him anyway?
Because she's the king's daughter.
There you go. She is the royal daughter. They don't dare, cross her because they realize that even though they're under orders from the king, she's the king's daughter. And she carries a little bit of clout in her own right. But then Saul says, I don't care. If you got to bring him in here, pick him up and bring the whole bed in. Go get him. So they go back to her house. In verse 16 says, when the messengers entered, behold, the household idol was on the bed, with a quilt of goat's hair at its head. So Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me like this and let my enemy go so that he has escaped? Now, David is Saul's son-in-law. And notice how Saul describes him. Yeah, and not that he's an enemy of the state. He's not an enemy of God. He's my enemy. And nobody is willing to call Saul down on it. Now notice in all of this, who is conspicuously absent from this whole story?
Samuel.
Samuel. Yeah, Jonathan's not there either, but Samuel definitely. You have to wonder, why isn't Samuel getting involved in any of this? Is it possible that God has allowed all these events to happen and is told, and again, this is speculation on our part, but you got to wonder, Samuel knows that David has been anointed as the king, and he is the rightful heir to the throne. You got to wonder Samuel's absence in all this, if God has told Samuel to stay out of it, because maybe David has to go through some of this stuff to basically do some growing up. Because even though David has already proven his capability in combat as a military leader, and we know that he's already at this point in his life written several psalms, so he's a spiritual leader. There's still something in his experience that he's lacking. He doesn't know yet what it takes to lead a nation.
Also, when Samuel anointed David, he basically set Saul against him as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Saul's behaving so irrationally that he might even try to kill Samuel.
He probably would have.
Yeah.
I just have to believe at this point that God probably told Samuel just to let it play out. Otherwise, I can't believe that Samuel would not have even gotten involved in it, because if Samuel is indeed God's prophet, and I'm not questioning that he's not, I'm saying, hypothetically speaking, if he's God's prophet, Samuel would have known that God will take care of business. But the fact that he's not there makes me think that Samuel was told just to stay home and let this work itself out. But Saul has now confronted his own daughter. He said, why did you deceive me and arrange for my enemy to escape? It says, and Michal said, this is back to verse 17, Michal said to Saul, he said to me, let me go. Why should I put you to death? Now, what had she just done?
Lied.
Yeah. She's basically claiming
I
that...
did it under duress, Daddy.
Yeah, that's exactly. She's saying, well, he told me he'd kill me if I didn't let him go. Well, now, that gets her off the hook here. But at the same time, now Saul, unfortunately, has a legitimate excuse for hunting David down and executing him. Because if what Michal said is true, what's that mean?
He is trying to kill him.
He's threatened the crown princess. Even though we know he didn't, Saul now has an excuse, because Michal has apparently publicly stated, well, he threatened to kill me if I didn't let him go. Now, this is verse 18. Now David fled and escaped and came to Samuel at Ramah. Now it's interesting, notice where David runs to. Now Samuel's back in the story. First place David goes to. He don't go home or back to Daddy's house in Bethlehem. He goes to Samuel. By the way, Ramah was only 3 miles away from Saul's palace. A good, healthy young man his age could have run that distance in about a half an hour. So David fled and escaped and came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and stayed in Naioth. And it was told Saul, saying, Behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. Now you'll notice this Naioth is in Ramah. It's believed that Naioth was probably the name of the compound in the town of Ramah where Samuel's school of prophets was. Remember, one of the things that Samuel had started some years earlier was a whole group or a school for professional prophets. And that they leave Samuel's house and go down the street to where his school is, which apparently again called Naioth. Then Saul sent messengers to take David, but when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, with Samuel standing and presiding over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. So all they had to do was get within sight of this school of prophets, and God deals with them by overwhelming them in such a way spiritually that they go into a prophetic trance and begin praising God. By the way, when it says they were prophesying, it doesn't mean that they're out there going, oh, thus saith the Lord. Blah, blah. All it means is they were praising God, probably singing, maybe quoting Psalms, joining in with the songs and the chants of the prophets. But they joined in. And verse 21 says that when it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. So Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also prophesied. Now, notice this happens 3 times. Notice how often things happen in groups of 3 in the Bible. So what you've got here is a witness of 3 different groups of these messengers all coming to get David, and none of them are able to do it because if they get within earshot of where the school of the prophets are, they join in with the praising and singing and prophesying along with the rest of them. But now comes the interesting part. And this is actually the highlight of this whole chapter. Verse 22, Saul himself decides, I'm not sending any more guards to go get him. I'm going to go deal with it myself. So then he himself went to Ramah. Now keep in mind, that's why this is important. It was only 3 miles away. Because if Saul struck out, if he was on foot, he could have made walk this distance in about 45 minutes. If he was on horse or camelback, could have done it in 15 minutes. He himself went to Ramah and came as far as the large well that is in Seku. That would have been about halfway there. And he asked and said, Where are Samuel and David? And someone said, Behold, they are at Naioth in Ramah. And he proceeded there to Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also, so that he went along prophesying continually until he came to Naioth in Ramah. Now, verse 24 is the interesting part. And he also stripped off his clothes. He has apparently become so
crazy.
Yeah, not just crazy, but that he's in a prophetic trance. He's not just in his right, not in his right mind mentally. He's like seeing visions, or he's in this trance where, you know, he's no longer in control of his own actions. The Spirit of God has basically got a hold of him to the extent that he's incapable of controlling his own actions. So what does he do? He strips down to, now whether he was naked, or most people believe he's probably down to his underwear, but whichever, doesn't really matter. What's important is, what did he get rid of?
His royal robes.
The royal robes. He gets within sight or even earshot of these prophets and gets close to Samuel and where David is, and he dumps his royal robes in the road. Why is that important?
Because he's no longer the king.
That's it. He might have been able to pretend to continue to be the king in his palace, but once he gets close to where Samuel is and God's prophet, and who else was there? David,
Anointed.
God's new anointed. When he gets within earshot of where they are, the Holy Spirit basically gets a hold of him to the point that he has to take off his royal robes, because we know that in God's eyes, he is no longer the king. He might be able to carry on that fakery in his own palace, but God will not allow him to approach his school of prophets wearing those royal robes.
It also shows just how in control God is, because as Saul is approaching, he's cursed by an evil demon that's indwelling him. And as soon as he gets within sight, God shows up and says, "Out of here, demon, I'm taking over."
But anyway, it says he also stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay naked all that day and all that night. Now, we got what appears to be a minor contradiction. About 4 or 5 chapters back, after Samuel assassinated Agag, we're told that Samuel left and that he did not see Saul again. Here we're told that Saul went looking for David, and gets here and said he prophesied before Samuel and lay naked all that day and all that night. Is that a contradiction?
Can't be.
Well, A, no conversation took place between the two of them. And more than likely, what happened is that Samuel and David are probably inside of this complex, Naioth. Saul is probably still out on the road, 100, 200 yards away, close enough he can see them and hear them, but he is not in Samuel's presence. He's out there publicly humiliated in the street of Ramah. And here's why, even though some of the commentators said that he might have stripped down to his underwear, I take it for what it says.
Yeah.
The word says he was naked. And I think God humiliated him and basically stripped him butt naked. So you got the king prophesying and singing praises to God. The Spirit of God has so overwhelmed him he can't help himself. Sort of like, remember Balaam, the Moabite prophet that tried to curse Israel? And he told him, said, look, said, I'll take your money and you can tell me what to prophesy, but if the Spirit of God comes on me, I'll have to say what the Spirit of God makes me say. And no matter how hard he tried to curse the Israelites, he kept blessing them because God wouldn't let him curse the Israelites. What you have there is Saul, who's come to do his dirty work, and God has so overwhelmed him, he has no choice but to praise God naked in the street. So the king is now humiliated in the streets of Ramah all day and all night. Therefore, they say, is Saul also among the prophets. By the way, that is Saul also among the prophets. That was a saying that got started back then that was not a compliment. That was an insult.
Does this mean that he's not king anymore?
What's that?
Does this mean he's not the king anymore?
Well, yes and no. Legally, he is still the king because King David, who could have taken the throne, has chosen not to force the issue. So he is the king, the de facto king. In other words, he's still acting as king. But in God's eyes, no, he's not. God has already declared that his anointing as king is gone. So it's sort of like
He's just pretending.
somebody who's like a lame, a president who's lost an election. He's a lame duck. He's lost the election. He's lost his anointing, but he hadn't handed over the gavel yet.
That's refusing to leave office after you lose the election.
Yeah, pretty much. What everybody seems to think Trump's going to do. And Trump makes, I think,
He loves it.
all of this stuff about, I think I might run for a third term. Trump knows he can't do that. What? He's
He's trolling them.
he's just making fun of them.
Yeah.
Because they're all getting all bent out of shape about it. But anyway, as far as Saul's concerned, Saul still thinks he's king. And Saul, I think probably by this point, I have no doubts it has been brought to Saul's attention that David has been anointed king. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's so bent on executing him. But I have to wonder in all this, if Jonathan and David were that good of friends, why doesn't he play more into this story than he does? Now, the only thing I can figure is Jonathan is caught between the proverbial rock and a hard place. And even though Jonathan knows he is the crown prince and would be the king under normal circumstances, I get the impression from the story Jonathan doesn't really want to be the king. He is more than happy to let David be the king.
And I'm thinking probably because God changed his heart to that.
Mm-hmm. I would really wonder what position Jonathan would have played in David's kingdom had he lived. Of course, we know he got killed in combat at the same time Saul did, by the way. But I would have to wonder when David actually, set up his throne and was then publicly crowned king by all of Israel, what position Jonathan would have played had he still been alive.
He would have been commander of the armies.
Either that or certainly have been David's right-hand man advisor. But again, we can only speculate about that. But I honestly think, just from the way the story plays out, I don't think Jonathan wanted to be the king. I think he was all too happy to let David.
He had a lot more respect for God's anointing than Saul did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for Saul to even think that he could kill God's anointed is it's just beyond imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think you're going to pull that off, Saul? Don't you think God's going to protect the one he anoints?
Well, I think it just tells you that by this point, Saul lost his
yeah.
he'd gone nuts. I think Saul was eat up with pride, hatred, paranoia.
I mean, Jonathan loved God, and Jonathan recognized that God would make the right choice.
Mm.
And if God chose David, then David's the right choice. And that's, in my mind, the mindset that Jonathan had.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, questions this evening?